Hello and welcome to the first look at my archery game for the HTC Vive. Now that I have gotten my Vive sent to me and delivered, I've been working for this past week on creating the game that I have been really interested in building since I saw an awesome tech demo at GDC in Unreal. This is being developed in Unity, as you can probably tell by some of the base textures and Arial font here that we're using, but this is the first week of real development using it. So the basic premise is it's a bow and arrow archery simulation game. It uses kind of a lot of the same ideas from the lab, but more in a fully fleshed out, less cartoony way. The bow is going to be a lot stronger than kind of the weak arch of some of the labs ones, although a lot of the systems have been lifted from that, as obviously the Valve developers have spent a long time in that. So some of the cool stuff that's going on here is there's an open source GitHub repository of HTC Vive inside Unity physics interaction systems. So picking up the bow, throwing it, catching it, that's all thanks to some open source stuff on GitHub. The audio system that's being used, although obviously you haven't heard any of it yet, is a binaural audio emulation system. So it should pretty accurately emulate 3D audio, even figuring out what's behind you. So these and any future videos will be much better experienced using headphones instead of speakers, because binaural audio can't be emulated through speakers. It really does need the left and right channels to be right inside your ears. Other than that, there's a couple miscellaneous plugins that I've had. Some of for like the score pop-ups on the targets and things are using the target moving are using a number of little tweening assets that I have from other projects from the Unity asset store. But other than that, this is a pretty fresh system. Obviously, I'm using the Steam VR plugin, but that's free and is pretty much required if you're going to build anything with the Vive in Unity. So without further ado, let's take a look at the bow and arrow. You can tell from the art style, I've made it look pretty similar to Super Hot, which if you don't know what that is, you should crawl out from under the rock and go check it out. You can even just play the free demo, but it's very much worth your time, and I love the art style that they use. I've loved the low polygon style since a long time before they used it, but this beautiful red metallic system in that makes it look really pretty, and I didn't have to do nearly as much work on figuring out the textures and modeling as I would have had to do if I was doing it photorealistic. I will probably be revisiting the material choices and the overall aesthetic of the game. As you can tell, that may not mix very well with the floor texture, but for now I think it looks really nice for very little work having to be put into it. So the bow mechanic itself is very similar to the lab. One of the things you'll notice off the bat, though, is that the lab gives you an arrow as soon as you pick up the bow, I think. This game does a slightly different thing that I took from the tech demo that I saw at GDC, where you actually have a quiver behind your back. If you look around, you can't see it. It's kind of just the idea of a quiver, where you pull the trigger down, put your hand behind you, bring it back, your hand behind your head and bring it back, and now you have an arrow in your hand, and you notch it. It doesn't kind of slowly interpolate into it. It's more when you bring it down, it's now notched. Now here is just the first view of the audio. So if I'm gonna pull the arrow back next to my right ear, and I'll pull it back next to my left ear, and you should be able to hear the difference there. The other thing is that the open source HTC Vive controller system on GitHub has a fantastic but really minimal use of the haptic system, and so, oops, must have done something there. So as I pull back, I can feel each little bit of the string getting pulled back more and more, and it really adds to the feeling of depth in the arrow. And if I bring up my controller right next to my mic, you may be able to hear it. But just that little detail really adds a lot to the realism of the game. Obviously, the most important part of a bow and arrow game is how it shoots. I'm not entirely sure why that happens, but week 1 bugs. But here, if we shoot, and a very light shot, we can see that the arrows kind of travel in an arc. And one of the interesting things that I've done here is try to get the arrow to follow a nice arc as it goes. So if I release it up and wait for it to fall down, oops, it hit that edge there, but you can see that it does kind of fall down. If I shoot it up, the arrow should come down pointing straight down once it lands. Yep. And this being a Unity game, I did try to find some resources to emulate that idea, and none of the systems that people had suggested really felt right to me. And so, because they use kind of they didn't use physics, and so what I do is I actually use the rigid body physics to add a force based on the direction the arrow's moving. So if the arrow's moving this way and it's tilted like this, a force is added to it to kind of push it back into the direction that it should be going based on the speed. So that gives it, which is kind of simulating the air rushing past, pushing on it, pushing on the feathers of the arrow as it moves past. And so it does tend to be fairly realistic when it's flying through the air at speed. But it also means that if I grab the arrow and just kind of throw it, it doesn't just automatically shoot to where it doesn't automatically point to just the direction that it's moving. I can throw it backwards and it won't immediately snap to position, which is what a lot of the other systems were trying to do. So shooting works pretty well. Obviously, I have also a number of target systems, and I really liked the idea of having kind of targets that physically exploded as when you hit them. You can see the results there. I think it worked pretty well, and that's just done by having that object is actually 30 pieces, and once you hit it, it kind of adds a little bit of force to each one of them so that it explodes once they get contacted by something moving at a significant force. The things like, you can see that one's going through the ground there. It's just that the ground doesn't count as one of those objects, so it needs to actually be hit by an arrow. Oops. And then it'll explode in a bunch of pieces. The character there has a ragdoll effect when you hit him, so I hope to add some more interesting targets, like people running around or something like that. But the current system, just for my amusement, today I created a running total of the last 15 arrows you've shot. If you miss, that counts as a 0, and you can see that the scores pop up based on where you hit the target. So the middle of these red and white targets is worth 500, and then less as you go out. The moving targets are worth 1,000, and less as you move out. So I think the edge is worth 250 on, yep, 250 for the red and white target. So a little variance between them for each ring is a different number, and I've just done that by there's 5 rings, and I've segmented the distance away into 5 separate pieces. So that should give you a separate score for each piece you've hit. In the future, obviously this is really only a week of work. In the future, I hope to add a number of more different types of targets, as well as some different bows and arrow types. And then the other thing is, because this is VR and we don't have to just stick to the normal idea of a shooting range, I'd really like this area to become fairly dynamic. You can see that kind of concrete block in the back. I want to add a lot of those moving around. I want this to be a very dynamic shooting range, kind of like a hollow deck where things can pop up and not necessarily be realistic as to where everything is. I'd love to get some more fluid animation later in where the ground kind of moves up and down, so that the ground is a bunch of modular blocks that move up and down based on the terrain, the desired terrain. I'll have some kind of online leaderboards shortly. I want to have that in so that there's some reason to have a good high score. Right now it does keep track of your local high score, and so setting up a multiplayer or kind of an online leaderboard is not very difficult. One of the things that I saw at GDC that I really want to do is have a two-person versus mode where you're both shooting at the same targets, so that you can shoot someone else's target, you can shoot them, although it won't do anything. But because obviously the Vive is really expensive and requires a pretty beefy computer, I don't know when I'll be able to test any multiplayer features. So that may have to wait, although it's definitely something that I really want to do in the future. So I think that pretty much sums up the work I've done so far this week with my game, and hopefully you guys like what you see, and you'll stick with me through this development process. Thanks.